Welcome students to the online NPTEL course Contemporary Architecture and Design. In the previous class we have started discussing the style of Chicago School movement, which was one of the movement under the functionalist style under modernism, earlier phases of modernism, and we started discussing the similarities and dissimilarities with Bauhaus movement and Chicago style movement. So we will just see how where Chicago School was placed in the time frame of modernism. It's within functionalism. Chicago School is there, which is almost parallel to Bauhaus style in their thought process, but the visual style of Chicago is very different from Bauhaus, and Bauhaus was more closely linked with this Stigl, which started in Europe, and Chicago was in USA. So Chicago took their inspiration from Art Nouveau style, and they have transferred the Art Nouveau style into the more geometric treatment in the facade. But Chicago schools more the main form evolved from functionalist approach. So only the facade treatments were taken from to aesthetically beautify that. Now we will see this Chicago schools position, how they are linked with Bauhaus, and how they have inspired another school of thought, which is Prairie. And so we have seen a little bit of inspiration what they have taken from Art Nouveau style. We have seen that in the service core, the work of the wrought iron work, even in the terracotta cladding work, how they have treated the building with some aesthetics, though the generation of the form was from absolutely functional requirement. Just the facade treatments were for the facade treatment they have taken inspiration from the Art Nouveau style, and but here also this style influenced another style, which is Prairie architecture style, though the Prairie architecture style was very different in nature, and many other things were there in their stylistic approach, but some influence was again transferred from the Chicago School movement. So this is how movement, different visual movement changes. They take inspiration from the previous style, and also they oppose the previous style, and then they create their own style. But when the next style comes, then the previous style again fades away, but some stylistic approach remains in the next style. Now again it was from in the early stage of modern, and we have seen some of the architects' work, especially William Hollabard's work, and we have today we will see mostly Louis Sullivan's work, who was one of the pioneering architect of Chicago School. And Louis Sullivan have worked in Chicago School architecture style, but he has some examples in Prairie School as well. So he is the architect who kind of bridges the Chicago School's architecture style and the Prairie School architecture style. That's why some of the architectural elements got transferred from Chicago School architecture style to Prairie School of architecture style. Now again we have seen this kind of treatment, and how they have treated the building in divided the building in three different phases, and how that inspiration, they have taken inspiration from Greek classical architecture for their facade treatment. But within the building this was absolutely functional, and service core, corridor, and then the functional and the main office buildings were there. Now we have also seen the Chicago style window, which was predominantly a style of there, and also the use of wrought iron filigree works, which have taken inspiration from Art Nouveau and Art and Craft movement. And also you see the service core at the center, and then the corridor, and then the served buildings outside. And so as the another new invention was the open floor plan, which was there in the Chicago style building. Now if we look at one of the pioneering architect of Chicago School style, who was Louis Henry Sullivan, he first connoted the term form follows function. Here if we see this, the form which will be followed by function. So function comes first and then the form. That is how the design process of Chicago School is evolved. So they have taken on the rectilinear plot, they started to place the service core in the middle in most of the cases, or it can also be shifted in some other side, and then the corridor, and then the functional space, the main spaces where the activity will go on will be on the surrounding. And then they have copied this floor plan, because this is an office building, and they have extruded it, so that generates the outer form of the building. Now when they have got a cuboid, now they started thinking how to decorate this from the outside. And because of the previous notion that this high rise was not seen and not there on the user's mental image or mental model, they started dividing it in three different phases, and for that they have taken inspiration of Greek architectural style. So this is how the function comes first, but form is also important, and which comes later. In some cases also we have seen services are pushed on the side, and then the open floor plan was there from outside. So this generates the form, but from outside they had to create the aesthetics from outside, and then they have again treated this divided in the three different spaces, which you will see in this building. Now there is an architect who's French architect who told that architecture must be true according to the program in functional need, and true according to the method of construction. So but previously in the pre-industrial revolution era, we have not seen much example of this thought, but he was an architect from the pre-industrial era and during the industrial era, but his thought got transferred and translated mostly in the Sullivan's work of form follows function. Now in his architectural style, if we see the architectural, what he says is must be solid, useful, and then beautiful. And in the material we have seen, we will see that Sullivan as well as the other Chicago schools architect, they have taken advantage of the new construction technique and new material. So steel frame structure was used, and that's why they can achieve high rise. And when they have achieved high rise, they also wanted to use the more convenient way of level change. That's why we will see use of earlier hydraulic lifts were there in the service cores. So may not be ornamental in terms of like Art Nouveau, but still it has an intricate detailing in the terracotta cladding and cast iron ornamentation. As we have already seen that this, though it's the structure of the building will be steel frame structure, but from outside there was a cladding. So that they can create some ornamentation with the on the facade, and with the cladding, terracotta cladding, and sometimes there will be granite and stone cladding. In the stone and terracotta cladding, they have imbibed some features from Art Nouveau, but which has been translated in lot into their paradigm shift of new material. And also similar works has been can be seen in the cast iron ornamentation. We have seen cast iron ornamentation in Art Nouveau style as well, and which has been used extensively by Victor Horta as well as Antonio Gaudi. So that similar kind of work we will see here as well in Louis Sullivan's work. Now broken, why this kind of treatment within the solid facade, where there is also a treatment of Greek architectural style, so stylobate, and then stylobate of the base, and then columns, and the solid and void of the columns, the void and the solid of columns, and then the cornice is also there with the treatments taken from the Greek style. And within that also they wanted to incorporate more work, and within this facade with the Chicago style window, they have also the treatments of Art Nouveau style to punctuate this solidity, because that time this kind of ornamentation was still less ornamental in their vocabulary, because we are discussing about the pre-modern era, and modernism just started, and modern abstract attraction was not around in the city. So these kind of buildings were very less in ornamentation, though it is in today's context it might seem to be very ornate in nature, but during that time this kind of buildings ornamentation was very less, because that these ornamentation is being compared with just before there was Art Nouveau style, and before that there was Baroque and Rococo. During that style there was a lot of ornate decoration started evolving. Even there are other styles like neoclassical and other mannerism styles were there, and so those were also very ornamental in nature. So this kind of they wanted to ornament this building because this looked very less ornamental during that time. Though Bauhaus created a very drastic image, that Bauhaus ornamentation was absolutely striking and with the absolute minimalist approach, but Chicago school they did not want that drastic minimalist style in their visual vocabulary. So if we look at Louis Sullivan's work, one of the famous building of Louis Sullivan's work is Guarantee Building in Chicago, which is also called Prudential Building. Here also we'll see the same kind of work and same kind of treatment over there, and this is also terracotta cladded from outside, and we'll see another different version of Chicago window, and here the window lines and this solid lines creates a solid and void, and so this kind of columns and solid and void is transferred into another different way. So this line of void and then solid creates that ambience. Though you can see that there are a lot of linear eye movement is happening in this part, so you can see that this is again going linear in nature, but in holistically you will see this is divided in three different strong horizontal lines. So though there is a verticality in this part, there was this is combined, and this is bracketed by the strong horizontal member from both the sides. Again you will see the same pattern here. It's like more void, and which is kind of simulates the stylo bit and main office building spaces, and the cornice which is used as services. Now if we look at the ornamentation carefully, so it's very high on they started to decorate the surface, because this surface from outside, the form wise, it looks it's a flat surface, and within that if we look at the light and the treatment over the terracotta tiles, it has high ornamentation within that. But here we'll see the it's the same terracotta tiles is getting repeated, which is definitely different from the Art Nouveau style, but in art and craft movement it was there. But if you look at the ornamentation, it's inspired from Art Nouveau, and again this kind of curves we will see, and this biomorphic lines which has a lot of flora and floral pattern within that, and ivy creepers, which was also the inspiration from of Art Nouveau, is there. And here if you look at the similar kind of biomorphic whiplash lines you will see, and even in the terracotta tiles on top of the Chicago window, which is very geometric and very modern, so you will see a juxtaposition of very minimalist approach of window decoration, and which is punctuated by very decorative tiles, which got its inspiration from Art Nouveau and art and craft movement. Also, it's another building by Carson Prairie Scott Departmental Store. This is a departmental store by Louis Sullivan. Again, in this top part, you will see absolute. It's a very less ornate part on top, but still you will see the cornice, base, and the main column, which acts as the office space. But in the near the vicinity of the road level, where people will walk from here, and this part will be more visible from their eye level, so here they have lot of intricate treatment outside there, and the treatment material is iron. Again this part they did not Louis Sullivan did not treat it in a high ornate way, because this is a skyscraper, and from here this treatment cannot be much visible, so this was left it was not treated as intricately as this. So if you look at from a human's eye perspective, so this kind of treatment in the iron you will see from outside. This is again the iron structures are there, so you will see a duality in the design style. So here the iron structures are coming from here, and some geometric forms are also there, and which continues on the top. But here if you look at the iron work, it's totally inspired from Art Nouveau. And if you look at here, you will see the biomorphic line again coming from here, and whiplash biomorphic line are coming from here, and a lot of floral ornamentations are there. And this can be manufactured in the industry, but because this was has a bilateral symmetry, which is a different style from Art Nouveau. In art, and also you can see this has a similarity in the design from the side panel as well. So this was manufactured in industry. Also there's a repetition in the design which was not there in the in the style of Art Nouveau, but still in the ornamentation, in the style of ornamentation, you will see clear indication that it got inspired from Art Nouveau style. Now in the Bauhaus style and Chicago style, if we look at, as we are discussing constantly, that though their philosophical thought was it came from function first and then form, but while treating the building, they again came up with a cuboidal building, but while treating from the outside and also from the inside, and they have taken a different approach. And while also evolving the form, Bauhaus were more flexible to go to the asymmetry of the form, but in Chicago we see more or less symmetry was maintained in Chicago school of thought. So also in the beginning we were telling that there's a school of thought which came after Chicago in USA, which is Prairie school of architecture style, which took its inspiration from Prairie grassland, which is a natural. The inspiration came into the nature's context, and they evolved their style from nature. So that's why another movement, modernist movement, was closely associated. Another movement, which is organic movement, was closely associated with Prairie style, but still Prairie got its inspiration from Chicago School of Architecture style as well. As Louis Sullivan, this is another building designed by Louis Sullivan, which comes under Prairie School of Architecture style, and this is again Louis Sullivan's guarantee building. So we will see the similarity between these two buildings. From outside you can see the color palette is quite similar, and then in Prairie School they started coming into the more horizontal. They have taken horizontality as their key stylistic feature, because these of the mostly these kind of architectures are on prairie grassland, not in the city. So they went which they wanted here in the city to go horizontal, but they could not. They have achieved that in the Prairie School of Architecture style. Now let's discuss the Prairie School of Architecture style. The main Prairie School of Architecture style started in the world's Columbian Exposition, which is in Chicago Fair, and we can see it's almost just before modernist movement in 1893. So during that time the Chicago School movement is also going on. So there is a classical influenced style in was there in this exposition. This exposition happened because it was a 400 years anniversary of Christopher Columbus, when Christopher Columbus came to USA. So in 1893 Chicago Fair happened, and in Chicago Fair a lot of different it's a fair, we will discuss that, and from the Chicago Fair a lot of different thoughts emerged. And once side we have seen a different kind of urban design style and different kind of architecture style. A lot of architects and designers got their inspiration from Chicago Fair. Not it's not that Chicago Fair inspire style and artistic style which was followed in the Chicago Fair followed, but there was an opposition and there was a movement against the style of Chicago Fair as well. And by the reaction and anti-reaction of this, a new kind of vocabulary of architecture style and as well as the urban design style evolved. So in Chicago Fair, what they have done is it's a installation of temporary building structures, which were not actually building, but the structures were made, which were temporary building structures. So they had a particular visual style, which was classical influence style. Then the American architects thought that this is not an American style which we should follow in America. So they went back to the nature and then took inspiration from the landform of America, because in America there was all the classical styles were evolved in Europe, so they were not the native of America. So when they have gone to their own motherland America for as an inspiration, they had the nature of America and the natural surroundings of America. So from there they have generated their architecture style, which is Prairie architecture style, and from that there was an organic movement started. So organic movement talks about taking inspiration from the nature and then putting that in an architecture style. So the vast treeless prairie land has the horizontality, and those horizontal lines and the color palette was the inspiration of the Prairie architectural style. Now we see in these buildings by Henry Louis Sullivan, who was also in the Chicago School movement, as well as the Frank Lloyd Wright, who is one of the pioneering architect in Prairie School, as well as Modern School of Architecture style. Modern and Prairie is almost similar. There is a little difference in that, but they're philosophically very same in the in philosophy and artistic style. So here also we see the linearity, and if we look at the color palette, they have similarity with the Chicago schools as well as Chicago schools, but here they have seen that they have said that it got inspiration from the grassland of Prairie. So here the Prairie architectural style is there, which is taking inspiration now from Chicago, but right now because they have evolved, they're evolving their form and aesthetics more from the nature, and there will be a lot of ornamentation in terms of with keeping functionality in mind, but a lot of solid and void and breaking the symmetry will be there. So in Prairie School of Architecture, if we look at the building, so there is a little bit similarity, but still it goes into the form side, and then it takes inspiration from surrounding, and there are a lot of treatment in the aesthetics in terms of form, as well as in the facade treatment, as well as the holistic form as well. So if we look at the building, this is Roorkee House by Frank Lloyd Wright. There are a lot of solid and void, and a lot of different elements are there. It's not just a cuboid. So there this is just juxtaposition of different cuboids, solidity, and other elements are there. So the background of the Prairie School of Architecture was World's Columbian Exposition, which happened in Chicago, which was also called as Chicago World's Fair. This was celebrating the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's discovery of America, and from there's a image of city which came, which we will just talk about, because this is more important in urban design and urban planning, but not in architecture. Now Daniel Burnham was the main architect of Chicago School, who was also part of Chicago School's architectural style. He was the main architect to envision the Chicago World Fair. Even Louis Sullivan created his stall, designed a stall which was the transportation stall, which talks about America's technology development in transportation. But that stall Louis Sullivan have designed in his architectural vocabulary. And also along with landscape design and Frederick Raw, homestead was there, and it was almost a 690 acre and 200 building was made, and most of the buildings, almost all of the buildings were temporary buildings. They were designed, the facade looks like a stone, and but this was designed with the stucco finish and plaster on jute fiber, but from outside it looks like a stone, and most of the buildings color was white. That's why it was called White City. Now, architectural style was featuring 200 temporary buildings designed to create an imaginary city of which reflects the Chicago School of Architecture as well as the classical revival. So if you look at, so similar kind of Chicago School architecture was there, but mostly it was classical revival, and the inspiration was taken from European classical style, and the symmetrical building was there, and so neoclassical, which was classical revival, and the new form of classical style or the classical revival which happened in the pre-industrial revolution was the main stylistic treatment of the Chicago Schools Fair. Now, as we are talking about what happened in the urban design, so image of a city, because they have created an imaginary city, and from there some thoughts came, and Kevin Lynch, you must have heard about Kevin Lynch, that he was one of the pioneering pioneering urban designer in the new paradigm of modern urban design. He told that image of a city is very important, and that comes into people's mind, and so he also have given 5 different elements to create which were the key point of image of a city, which is pathway, node, and district, and landmark, and the periphery, which is the fringe. So all these things which is the edge, and everything together creates a image of a city, and which evolved from the this Chicago fair, or the or it is also a city beautiful movement generated after this fair. But that is a part of urban design and urban planning side, which we will not touch, and we will look at what was the influence of Chicago fair in architectural style. So most of the buildings were City Beautiful movement was also a part of it, but we are not discussing this. But if we look at the buildings, here in the buildings, this was neoclassical style of building was followed. But here in this, if we look at the city planning, it was really well planned, and then the symmetry and the axis, landmark, everything you can see in the building, and the plaza and the common open spaces. But here, if we look at the architecture, the style was neoclassical, and all the inspiration was from Europe. So they thought that this symposition was influenced by European classicism and has no root in America, because all the treatment was there in taken from the Europe, but the American architect thought this does not represent our own nation. So it got criticized that it was not contextual, and it takes inspiration from an other continent which should not be followed. And then they started searching an American style which can be totally generated from an American land, and as they have not much architecture style which came from American architecture style, because there was no history which evolved in America. Everything till now, industrial revolution, till the industrial revolution, everything came from Europe. So they had to go back to a non-architectural influence, which is nature. So there was a birth of new architecture style which was against the Chicago School, which was against the Chicago movement, Chicago World Fair. So the context of America was going back to nature, and every other architectural style was Europe was rejected. And then America went to its vast prairie land. If you look at America's map, and this part is Canada and this part is Mexico, and the main part of the America, there's a lot of area where the prairie grassland was there. So this they took the inspiration of prairie grassland as their inspiration board. So if we look at the prairie grassland, which looks something like this, so in prairie grassland we will look something like browner color tone, and this grassland does not have much tree in the grassland, so a lot of horizontal lines will be there, where the different kind of crops will create a different line, even with the little bit undulation with the part. If you see from this side, so this kind of this part, and then there will be a darker patch, and then again solid. So a lot of horizontal lines will evolve in the nature of the prairie land. And this is if we look at, so there's a lot of horizontal lines will create a horizontality in the picture frame. And even if you look at the Prairie kind of traditional houses, they have this kind of pitched roof, which we'll also see in the Prairie School of Architecture style. So here the stylistic features were horizontal line, the color palette which is derived from Prairie grassland, which is brown and brown in color. So they have they got represented in architecture by terracotta tiles and the brick which has the similar kind of color tone. So and a lot of horizontal lines were created, and also asymmetry, because it's evolved from nature. As in Chicago School of Architecture, the inspiration were Greek classical architecture. That's why the symmetry is maintained. But here because it's from nature, and nature is asymmetric, so asymmetrical buildings were the main style. So most of the and all of the Prairie architectural style and the organic architectural style, the buildings were asymmetrical in nature, which is the difference between Chicago School and Prairie School. There are many other differences which we'll discuss. And also organic architecture style evolved from the Prairie architecture style, because Prairie architecture style, when they talk about it, the inspiration only comes from the Prairie grassland, but the process of taking nature as an inspiration was then called as organic architecture style. So if not Prairie grassland is situated in some other places, then how they have taken inspiration from the nature and they have evolved the built form from the nature is an example of organic architecture style. We will discuss organic architecture and mostly with the example of falling water building by Frank Lloyd Wright, and we will understand how the same process of taking nature as an inspiration and creating a visual vocabulary got translated into a different context where the nature was different. It was on a river, on a cascade, and how the cascade's natural form got translated into the built form. We will see in the organic architecture there. The nature and this is a Frank Lloyd Wright's quote: "Nature builds a tree from the inside out," and this is what organic architecture is. It is a building the way nature builds. So they have taken inspiration of nature from their visual vocabulary as well as the philosophy, how nature creates and how nature creates. They wanted to create the building in that same fashion. So the architectural features, if we look at, the low pitched roof will be there, because, and here it also has some connection with the traditional style, and which is also followed in the art and craft movement, and also the traditional building in the Prairie architecture, which we have seen in the previous slide, that they have the pitched roof in the previous styles, or the flat cantilever roofs to develop overhang. The flat cantilevers were coming from the horizontal lines of the Prairie land, and pitched roofs are coming from the traditional architectural building. The long rows of casement windows, that was one of the style of Prairie architecture style. This long rows of casement windows creates a void, and on top of this casement window, which is glass, which acts as a voice, there will be a solid cantilever that creates the solid and void in horizontal direction. Now native material was used, and which was woodwork within the building, mostly within the built form of within the to create the interior, and also the stained glasses. We'll see the stained glasses, which is not painted but stained glasses, how they have taken inspiration of creating the design of stained glasses. And the outside we will also see the brickwork, which creates gives the essence of the same color palette of the Prairie land. Now if we look at the similarity, this is Walter Griffin's, this is these two other buildings of Prairie architecture style, and this is William Morris art and craft movement. So here also they have taken they have retained the traditional style of pitched roof, and Prairie also they have retained the traditional style of pitched roof. This is Frank Lloyd Wright's building, but here we'll see more abstraction and more clean and more minimalist approaches there in the Prairie style. Or also a lot of horizontal lines were added to break the building into more horizontal features and give it a more horizontality in the visual. Here also in Frank Lloyd Wright's building we will see the same features. Now, if we compare the style of Chicago schools and Prairie school, we will see some similar horizontal line what they wanted there, which could have achieved, which they have easily achieved in the Prairie land, because this was not in the city. And because also some of the architects, especially William Henry Sullivan, was also an architect, designed some buildings in Chicago school as well as in Prairie school. So the design style percolated from one style to other. In the next class we will discuss more examples of Prairie school of architecture style.